I will start with just a few updates, things that are going on. Mike is here to give us a 2-minute update about buildings and grounds and the gift shop, which is going to be renovated. I'll start by saying that starting November 1st, we're returning to our winter museum hours, which will be closed on Mondays, open Tuesday through Sunday, 10 to 5. And then it sounds like we're going to continue that 10 a.m. opening, right, after, like, into the summer, and we're just going to be 10 to 5 daily for the summer hours. So that starts November 1st. We have 2 new staff to mention. We have Stephen Urchinoli, who is in visitor services at the front desk working with Debbie in the gift shop and the front desk, and hopefully he'll have time to swing in for the potluck at least to say hi. And we have Julia Spencer here. We're happy to have Julia. Jane, do you want to say a couple things?
I'd be happy to. So I'm going to take this off for a second.
Yeah, I'm going to leave mine off.
So Julia, this is her 3rd week in the education department. She is the assistant curator of education, meaning she oversees and delivers all of the youth ed programming as well as some of the adult ed programming. Rachel and I will still be spearheading the Make It Wild program in the winter. And so, you know, there's adult ed associated with Western Visions. Adult ed is kind of spread around the museum, but some of it lies within the education department, and Julia will be doing some of that. Julia lives here in Jackson. She has been living here in Jackson. She didn't move here. Well, she did move here from Colorado one time, but she's been in Jackson for a while. She worked previously for Teton Science Schools as a graduate program and field studies faculty member. She also worked previously at the Jacksonville Children's Museum as their after-school coordinator and lead teacher. Julia has an MS in Natural Science Education, I got it right that time, Natural Science Education, and a BA in Geology with a minor in Latin American Studies. Yesterday, Julia was working with Carrie, recording some of our cell phone audio tours in Spanish, which we're really excited about to have somebody on staff who can help with that kind of thing. So like I said, she's in her 3rd week. Her office is right adjacent to Rachel's. Do you all know where Rachel's office is? If you go in the classroom, Rachel's office is that first one with the window that looks into the classroom, and Julia is right next to that one. So go in, as when you're saying hi to Rachel, also go in and say hi to Julia.
Perfect. Thanks, Jane.
Yay, welcome Julia!
And then switching to a sad note, Tiffany Bajer is departing. You should have all gotten an email about that. Tiffany is moving back to Boulder, or moving to Boulder, Colorado, so she'll be greatly missed, and obviously we'll be hiring for that position, I'm sure, very soon. I would have to imagine, but I haven't heard anything about that.
It's
Maybe
already
Mike can
posted on the website. It's
Perfect.
in Buckrail, and we're going to put it on Indeed and a few places. So.
Great. And we have a trustee, Charlotte Stifel, who gave her resignation. She has decided to spend more time on the East Coast with her family, but wrote about her appreciation and gratitude as a board member. I have to say thank you to the Volunteer Leadership Committee, because we've been working for the past really a year. It kind of fizzled out there for a while, but we decided to write a NIMWA volunteer mission statement specific to the volunteer program. So we have decided that our mission, we've never had one before just for the volunteer program, so I just thought it seemed like a good thing to do. So the mission of the volunteer community is to enhance and reinforce the mission and vision of the National Museum of Wildlife Art by sharing our unique skills, passion, and enthusiasm, being ambassadors for the organization, engaging visitors and forging connections, and continuing to learn and have fun. So thanks to DSC for helping me write that. Down here, just some topics we'll talk about here. I have a quick update from Kate Jensen. If you remember a while back, we put together some art kits for the Wind River kids. And so this is an update from her, wanting us to know that they finished the art kit project and they delivered 888 art kits to the Wind River Reservation to support both the Eastern Shoshone and Northern Arapaho children. She says, your support is so valued in this endeavor, and I look forward to further collaboration. And then she says the kids started using the kits the day after we sent them, so here are some pictures.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Wow.
Remember rolling those up?
Yes. These are really neat parfleche sort of blocks. We're bagging up all those beads.
Oh, that's great.
So that's pretty exciting. Mike, why don't you give us a buildings and grounds update?
Sure, quick, take a quick minute. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Good morning.
I'll take my mask off because I don't project very well as it is. Don't roll your eyes at me. Good morning. So we're doing a shop renovation. We're thrilled. It's going to start in probably mid-January. We'll have our construction group. It's ACM, Ben Offerheide is his name. Ben Offerheide Construction. They'll be up. They'll begin mid-January. They'll start demoing all the old equipment. Fixtures, lights, carpet, paint. It's all going to go out, and then those will be redone. We have it's called Opto. They're a big retail fixture furniture company. They're already began creating the style that Debbie chose, and it's going to be going in the shop. I think they'll be done. We're hoping to be done within mid-January, so all of February, and then March. So we're hoping by mid or end of March that the project will be done. So the shop will be closed at that time. We're throwing around ideas. Maybe we do a little kiosk in Sullivan Hall, or maybe do something in here in the members lounge, but it might conflict with other rental opportunities. So it's to be determined. Any questions?
I'll mention there's a printout on that coffee table over there with some of the color schemes that I think were approved, the way I understand it. So you can take a look at that if you'd like, unless they've changed, which is possible. But
Not so much. Yeah.
Just an ops question. I noticed that beautiful new van with a great label on it.
yeah.
Yeah, we bought it. For years, our old facilities director had wanted to buy an all-wheel drive van. Anyways, we finally pulled the trigger. We have a new van. So the Ford Explorer, that was affectionately known as the Ford Exploder, because it was so old, has gone away. And we have a new all-passenger van that can be used. So, but thanks for noticing. They just got graphics were just put on yesterday. So, thanks.
Where is it?
It's in the back. Did you come in the back? It was right by it's parked out there.
Okay.
It's quite beautiful, the decals like it
It's
is.
blue and
Yeah.
white.
If you want to go joyriding to try it out, we'll have on the floor.
I was telling security we should be in like the 4th of July parade, right? And, like pack us all in and
That's
like, jump out when the parade stops. It'd be really fun.
I'd like to see that.
Okay.
I'd loan it out
We
for
can get some
that.
volunteers. Sure.
And another reason why we've been wanting to get it is when that fire happened up on the hillside, we realized we didn't have any vehicle. Had we decided to take some of the artwork out of storage or off the walls and take it off site, we realized we don't have a vehicle that would allow us to do that. So that's another reason. That's why it's so tall.
Sure, yeah. We opted for the biggest we could get height-wise so we could fit what we could in there. Good point, thanks, Jane. All right, anything else?
Cool, that's good. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
So you're free to go, Mike. Come back for the potluck.
With the wings.
Yes.
I know, that was my question, did you bring chicken?
He said he was going to go get some.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
A newsletter update. Karen Rocky's been editing our newsletter for quite a few years. Come on in, Brew.
Are we going by never late, better late than never?
Of course, always. So Karen Rocky's been editing our volunteer newsletter for quite some time. I don't know if it's been several years at this point. I think it probably has. I think as long as I've been here, probably at least 4 years, 5 years. So she is stepping down as editor of the volunteer newspaper. So if anyone would like to take on that chore, or if 2 people would like to tag team it, anybody who might have experience in that, anybody who might like to help with the volunteer newsletter, just let me know. Bruce an editor, so I but she may not be interested.
And it
that's
could
fine.
be 2 people doing
It could be
it
2
at the fair,
people,
correct?
and it can go in any direction. If you want to give it a fresh eye and just completely redo it, we're open to that. I just think it's nice to have that outlet to keep volunteers abreast of what's going on in the volunteer program, right? And fun stories. It's supposed to be a social newsletter, which is hard to do, but that's kind of how it was originally intended to be. But it could go any direction, so. As Jane mentioned, the Make It Wild Dick Jennings Memorial Scholarship will continue this year with Make It Wild. So I did list the dates here on the quarterly agenda just so you can have them. It'll start in December. And we're gonna have a volunteer holiday, what I'm calling a Thanksmas party in November. It's a combo Thanksgiving, Christmas, celebrate the holiday season party, so I hope you can join us for that. RSVP to me by November 8th, which is just the week prior.
Is it an RSVP +1 or is it?
It is. I didn't include that on the invitation, but I think it's safe to say that we can do that. We can allow spouses a +1 if you would like. I have $1,000, so I think I can make it spread pretty far. Yeah, we're gonna have some Bubba's sandwiches and some drinks and sides, and then we'll do a potluck sort of dessert bar where maybe I'll choose some poor soul to be a judge, or maybe we'll just each vote for what we think is the best one. We'll see. I'll figure all that out. We'll play some games. We'll have some fun.
It's social rather than education.
It is a social event. Yes. There will be no education. Okay, what are we doing on time here? What do we got? 10:18. Okay, sweet, I did that quickly. That's what I was hoping. I wanted to share with you that Viknet, most of you use Viknet a little bit, I think, at least have tried it. They've made some improvements. They've made it a little bit better. So if any of you have tried to log in recently, you might see that it looks a little different. So they're calling it Viknet Beta. And if you want to continue using the old legacy version, if you decide you prefer that one, you absolutely can, at least for a little while. But if you decide you like the new version, you can go ahead and use that. But if you want the old one, you just use like the older URL that you might have bookmarked on your computer or saved or whatever. But I did update my email signature to the new link, and it's on the agenda there as well, what the new link is. So what they've done is they've made it a little sleeker, maybe simplified it a little bit. The biggest thing is that it's mobile responsive, so you can use it on your cell phone or your desktop or your iPad, and it will basically look the same. There's no more, oh, this is different because I'm on my phone, which I think is a really helpful thing. There's different theming, so I've chosen some colors. The schedule looks a little different, so you can now choose to look at the whole month or the week or the day, and something called an agenda view, which I really haven't played with yet, but I think it's that one, the lines. And there's also a more comprehensive filter, so it should be easier to find exactly what you're trying to see. You can also print out your service history. Maybe not anybody would really need to do that necessarily, but I think you can also print a hard copy of a schedule, which I don't think you could do before. That would be helpful for me. And then the other thing is that it will work now with your browser's navigation controls, so you can go back and forward and not get kicked off of the program. So it's like, duh. So that might take a little getting used to, but hopefully you'll find it a little bit easier to use. And obviously, if anybody wants a refresher or wants to sit down with me and go through how to use this, I'm happy to do that at any time. So this is what it looks like now. If anybody has any crazy opinions about the colors I chose to, let me know. I can change this up. And I mean, you see I have the outdated logo, so I have to update our logo up there. And I don't know why there's a globe here. This is kind of weird. I might take that off. I don't know why that's there. But just to give you a quick tour so that you know how to find things, this is pretty much the same. This is what we call the home page, so you can find that here. At the top, there's little tabs across the top just like it was before. Here's the permanent collection audio tour, the most recent volunteer directory, and the most recent volunteer calendar. This section here with news I will update from time to time, especially about COVID updates. If we're wearing masks, we're not wearing masks, we're open, we're closed, whatever, that's a spot that I'll put that information. And then what you guys use most of all is the schedule or the timesheet. Profile you can go to if you want to update your information, if your phone number changes, that kind of thing. Schedule is what you're scheduled for, and it's a way to look at this. And I haven't played with this a ton, but here's the month view, the week view, the day view, and an agenda view. So just depending on how you like to look at it. If we're looking at the month, you can see here it says 2 openings, which happens to be for today for some planting. So the red ones are open. You can see it says open right here. It says the time. This one's green, which means it's filled, so thank you, Linda. This one, if you click on it, then it will give you more information. It will tell you the notes here. So you do have to click on it to find out the specifics of the shift. This is for Greater Yellowstone Botanical Tour planting. Which, if any of you are interested in helping with that today, if you dress properly, you can help after the potluck.
And you wouldn't necessarily have to stay all of that
No.
time. You could go, if you had an hour, for example,
Exactly.
they would love to have help out there.
Yeah, we did it yesterday, and in an hour, we planted 125.
That's
sagebrush.
amazing.
But like, it was like that.
Yeah, were there quite a few volunteers yesterday from the botanical people? Yeah. Yeah, okay,
More people would be great.
that's good. Let's see, then the other thing, so the other big thing is the timesheet. So this is how you log your hours. This is how you enter the time that you've given. So today's date still will come up automatically like it used to, but if you need to go back in time, if you forgot from last week, you can choose another date. I guess I just double clicked that to choose the date range. You can choose a date range, it looks like. I may change that so that it's only one day. I bet I can find a setting for that. Anyway, the duration, you just type in, by clicking here, you just click the number of hours, the number of minutes. I also need to change this because you don't need to log 5 minutes. We round up by 15. So I will change that. And then this is your assignment with the same codes we've always used. Your username to get into this is the same. It's your email address, whatever you have on file with me. And then the password will remain the same too. So there shouldn't be any issues with logging in fully.
Rachel, can you remind me of what the password is?
So for most people, it's uppercase NMWA 1987, or the opposite. I think it's the numbers come first. 1987 and NMWA. It's true for most people, unless you've decided to change that password,
I see.
which you have the capacity to do if you want a different password. But
Right.
it's easiest if you just use that, and then I can tell you what the password is. Otherwise, we have to go through this kind of complicated rigmarole to change your password. So
Is this the same thing as Volgistics?
yes, this is
Okay,
Volgistics.
good.
Yeah.
I got the two confused.
It's confusing. So the Volgistics is like the whole program.
Okay.
So the part that I use to enter in everybody's data, the back side of it, they call Volgistics. And then they call Viknet what volunteers have access to, because it's a little different. It's a smaller version, basically, of Volgistics. So they're connected, but I try to stick with Viknet when I'm telling you guys what it is, but Volgistics is the name of the program. So it's confusing. It's confusing for me because I have 2 separate logins for Volgistics and Viknet, when it's really the same thing.
Is there not another password?
So if you go to the website,
Correct.
yeah, thank you. So the wildlifeart.org/volunteers, or if you go to wildlifeart.org, go under support,
Correct.
down to volunteer login. That brings you here. Oh, and see, and it doesn't remember me because this is a new computer. So the password,
It also
One,
expires by time.
it probably does, or if you like delete your cookies or something, then you'll have to re-enter this password. But it's 18 and then a lowercase VOL for volunteer, and then uppercase NMWA.
And
And I think I put that on the
It's
agenda.
on the agenda. It's
Yeah.
on there.
Mhm. Enter, and so that's what brings you
To the login.
to the login page. So there's different ways you can access that. You know, if you like using the web page, you're welcome to continue to do that. When you click login, click this login to Viknet, and that brings you up to the new page. So like I said, if you prefer the old URL, then you may want to use, hopefully you have that saved somewhere, or I can always resend it too. The instructions are around still, so we can.
Rachel, is there any way for some of us that are not very well educated,
As the doctor in the room.
today, in medicine, we don't do this. I just put the bones back together in the new joint. But I can never get in, but for some reason, I'm having,
Yeah, we need to sit down and look at it then,
we've
Bill,
done it
because
before, we
it's
think we have
finicky.
it, and I'm just not that smart when it comes,
No,
I can take care of infections and broken bones, but I sure can't take care of,
I'm not
I
sure
can't
that it's
get
you.
in
I'm not
today.
sure that it's you, Bill. I think
I
it's
can't get in
it's the
today, it
technology.
will not
but-
accept me today.
Okay.
God, I need this.
Well, we'll figure it out. I guarantee you're not the only one who says
I
that.
sort
So.
of feel, that makes you feel awful dumb.
I
Oh, sorry.
The robots are
That's
really
what
good at making
computers
our
are
lives
for.
harder. Yeah, yeah.
They make us feel dumb so they can take over the world someday, right?
I just read biology, history, it's so simple compared to this.
And what I'll do as well is I'll put together a new sort of cheat sheet like I did for Viknet when we started using it that goes through the process and shows you little pictures, and it just will take some time for me to sit down and put that together, but that'll have the new URL and I'll include instructions on how to create a shortcut, because I think that's really helpful on your phone or on your desktop, just to either bookmark that URL on your desktop browser, or make a little icon on your phone that you can just click, and then it should remember you and just let you in. And that, if you can get that to work, I know we've tried that with you, Bill, and the icon disappears, and
It was brilliant that you put it under your signature, I have to say.
a volunteer gave me that idea. Who was that? Lori, I forget who it was. Somebody was like, just put it in your signature. I will do that, because then it's always there. Yeah, so you can definitely depend on that being there. The new Volgistics, this new Viknet 2, they're going to be phasing out Internet Explorer, apparently. I think now maybe you can still get away with using that, but down the road it won't work on Internet Explorer, so you'll have to use a different browser. And there's a list, I think, on the agenda.
Yeah, it's there.
Okay, thank you. So this is the same process really for posting hours. I'll just finish with this. We can say an hour for today, which is, there's a specific quarterly meeting.
Do we have the hillside restoration, I'm sorry. Is the hillside restoration up?
I've been calling that facilities maintenance.
I thought that was picking up garbage.
Well, that's the closest thing. We don't have a specific sculpture trail, but because it's part of our facilities, does that make sense to you, Jane, to separate
Or
code?
maybe sustainability, since it's native plant.
Or
restoration.
sustainability. I never used that code. That was one that, did you create sustainability, Carrie?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of projects under that one.
Right, but this could fit under sustainability. You can use that if you want to. Yeah, it matters less what the code is really in the grand scheme of things. Or if you have a question about what a code should be, just ask me. But we do have one for quarterly meetings, so everybody can post your hours for today. And then you just hit post, and it says, are you sure, yes, no, and then it's done. And then you can look at service history here. Shows 2021, I've given an hour, yay me. So I think that's all I really wanted to share about Viknet. I mean, you're not gonna hurt anything by clicking through these. Mail is a weird thing that they offer that I don't have any interest in sending you additional mail through Viknet when I already use email. So I don't see how this helps us yet. So that's what this mail thing is. You should already get automatic emails to your email when you sign up for something in Viknet. So most of you should see those come through, hopefully. If you don't, let me know. If you want to get those reminders, I might need to change a setting if you're not receiving them. Any other questions about Viknet? All right, so how many of you watched Kelsey's presentation or were here for Kelsey's presentation this summer? Okay, about half. So if you haven't seen her presentation, I recommend that you do. She was our curatorial intern this past summer, and so she was talking about some new perspectives in the galleries, things to consider in the permanent collection. And some of the things that she talked about were to bring awareness to other perspectives from some other voices that are sometimes ignored in art, indigenous voices, LGBTQ voices, things like that. So she had a lot of really interesting points, but it was a difficult discussion, I think, for a lot of people. And I wanted to just give you guys some time today to talk about it and to kind of just continue the discussion, because it's not something that has a, an answer. But it's just something I wanted to let you guys talk about and see kind of how we can help you with these kind of topics. So hopefully today we'll have time to just kind of have a discussion. I'm going to start with a little PowerPoint with some information, sharing some articles about some recent controversies, some artists that have been kind of considered controversial, and basically how museums are dealing with those controversies is kind of what I want to focus on. It's like, what are other museums doing when a piece of artwork or an artist comes up that people get upset about? And what can we do to bring them down, and really focusing in on our mission as a museum? And so how are other museums kind of dealing with their missions and how these topics have come up? And you'll notice that on your table, there's a pile of agendas. There's a pile in the center that is an article about Audubon. Each of the 4 round tables has a different article about John James Audubon. So once I'm kind of through this little presentation, I'll ask all of you to read through that article and then just kind of talk about it at your table amongst your friends here. And then I'll ask one person from each table to just kind of mention a couple of points from that article, because they are each different. They're all different articles about Audubon. And to just kind of share with the room what you read and maybe 1 or 2 things that you thought stood out to you. So that's kind of how this training will go. And feel free to stop me at any point with questions or comments or anything while we go through this. And I wanted to start with this question: should museums present information neutrally, as in just the facts, or can they take a position? So the American Alliance of Museums, AAM, and Wilkening Consulting asked those questions as part of their 2020 Museum Goers Survey. So this is a survey that they do every year, from what I understand.
Yep.
And they asked 4 different groups of people. They asked all museum types, like zoos and natural history museums, and then they asked a group of what they called the broader population, which is basically non-museum people, and they asked the Wildlife Art Museum. So you can see here the blue in the middle of the graph is NIMLA, and then the green is art museums in general. And so they asked specific questions of these different groups of people. And this first question I wanted to bring up was, how should museums engage you with content? And the number 1 answer was deeper understanding. And the number 2 was beautiful, aesthetic. Number 3 here was think in new ways, share new facts. So down here towards the bottom answers, we have connect in real life, teach empathy, be more inclusive, and, be less exclusive, be more inclusive, and lead civil conversations.
I'm sorry, Rachel.
Yes.
You said, if you back up 3, teach empathy?
Teach empathy. Yeah, teach empathy is down here above 25% of respondents said teach empathy. 26% maybe, it's right here. That's surprising to me. A lot of this is a little bit surprising to me, and this is only one survey, right? This is a lot of different people from all different, from across the country. I think North America and Canada was where this was asked. This question, should museums take a position? The number 1 answer was yes, evidence and mission-based. Number 2 answer was always remain neutral. And then the fewest responses, yes, activist, and yes, when most people agree. What's interesting about this is here's that 4th bar that's been added. This is the broader population. This is non-museum goers. So that you can see there's a pretty big discrepancy in these of the broader population versus museum goers.
And what is that 4th thing where your arrow is?
This one down here is none of these, I don't know. So the broader population is like, what the hell are you talking about? Are you speaking English?
But, excuse me,
Yeah.
do they qualify it? Should museums take a position on?
So
Or
they
just
were
opposition?
given more information than what's
Oh,
here.
Okay.
So they had more qualifiers than that.
Okay.
They should have known what what we meant, but, you know.
I was wondering, Dean, do you remember, was that kind of just a broad thing of like philosophically should museums like take a stance?
I thought it
Do you
was
think that was right?
political, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
I thought it was broad, but I
Maybe
can't
it
remember
was.
for sure. So our museum we did participate in 2020, and we were one of the we meaning we sent out, I think, 800 surveys through this AAM vehicle to our members. So for our museum, it was a member survey.
Mhm.
I'm assuming most museums who participated sent it to their members because that's the easiest emails to get, but I'm not 100% sure about that. So like Rachel said, when you look at the results, you see all museums that participated in the survey in 2020. Then the one in the middle, or the blue, I'm sorry, the next one that says wildlife is their shorthand for our museum, National Museum of Wildlife Art. And then the green is art museums, all the art museums who participated. And then the last one, in this case, is broader population, people not connected with museums particularly. And they were pretty general. You know, should museums take a position? You might say, well, a position on what? They were pretty general. They did not really spell it out, is my recollection. I could be wrong.
No, that's probably, you're probably right.
Well, it seems to me you can talk about the artist and the art, but to point out a weakness in a person or something just seems like not necessary. You know, we all have our weaknesses. We all have things, and you talk about an artist and then you say, but they had so-and-so, you know, or in their personal life. I just, that's real hard for me.
And we're going to get into that.
Yeah, no, you nailed it. That's the question for today, is how do we address that as volunteers and as a museum? This conversation today, I don't intend to be a sort of counterpoint to Kelsey's presentation necessarily. I think it's important that we recognize that there are multiple perspectives in the world and that those people will visit here. And so I'm just trying to give you all tools to be able to have a conversation with somebody in a civil way, or to be able to bring someone down or bring someone back to the art. Sort of point here, I'll go to my next page here.
Rachel, I'll say one thing about this slide while you're on it, how
Yeah.
museums should museums take a position.
Yeah.
Having been at this museum for 30 years, the biggest issue that in the early days was, should we take a position on conservation issues? There was a lot of conversation about that. And when I first started here, we were told very specifically, we being employees and volunteers, that we should always be neutral. This was in 1991 when I started here. At that time, the general thought was museums should always be neutral. And the big issue back then was, should wolves be reintroduced to Yellowstone? And it was, as you can imagine, people felt strongly on both sides of that question. And as an educator at this museum, I was told, if you have someone like Renee Askins come in and say, wolves should be reintroduced to Yellowstone, you also have to have a rancher come in and give the counterpoint and explain to your audience why maybe it's not such a good thing to bring wolves back to Wyoming. I have seen things at our museum slowly change in that realm. Specifically, I think we're much more likely to take a stance on conservation now than we were in 1991 when I started, which I think is appropriate for a wildlife art museum to take a stance and say, we must protect habitat, we must protect migration corridors. Not everyone will probably agree with me, but as you can see, there are lots of different perspectives. So when I see that, should museums take a position, to me, I automatically go back to that conservation question. Should we take a position on conservation? I personally think we should, but that has changed over time for this museum. And I probably felt like that in 1991, even though I had to go by the party line, and when I was planning programs, present both sides of the issue.
Well, and in this case, when it says, you know, the majority of people are saying, you know, like, yes, to the position evidence and mission-based, like for us,
Right.
you know,
That is
that goes
mission-based,
mission-based.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly, there's
Yes.
a direct link, you know,
Exactly.
and yeah, and we know that visitors come to our museum, and without ever being told this, they believe that we exist to support ecological conservation, which we didn't always have that information, so it's really interesting to see how these things kind of shift and
Right.
flow. And that's really, yeah, that's cool.
I think it's important to, like, since, and Jane said this, the survey went out to members, and it's important to remember, like, who are members of museums and who aren't members of museums. And so this is representing probably a certain perspective on these issues, not necessarily a broad perspective of audiences that might come into the museum. I just wanted.
Good point.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I would just make a comment, in tours, I've had that happen.
Yeah.
And I've always given both sides.
Yeah.
I've
There's
always talked
certainly
about
the-
how Wyoming is ranch country, and that ranchers have a specific feeling.
Right.
But there's also people here who are adamant that we protect both.
Yeah.
So, I don't think it's,
You can't go,
difficult
I don't think
to-
you can go wrong by
Yeah.
educating people that have different perspectives in this state.
or just acknowledging that there are different perspectives.
Exactly.
Not that it's always cut and dry.
So one of, maybe we're not at the lessons part yet, but for,
This is discussion, not a lesson.
so it is mission-based, and one of our own particular work might be to think about it enough that we know how to be neutral in our words and our temperament when we're interacting with others.
And it's hard to be milquetoast.
Well, I don't think,
It is.
Well, I
of
don't
course
think
it
you
is,
can-
but it, you know, I mean, you
But I
just,
think you can give both perspectives without saying, I agree with.
or letting your voice get like this.
You can say some people feel that wolves don't belong in Wyoming for these reasons, without saying, I agree with them.
Like the Met has a policy where you always step back to the work, to the piece.
Right.
And you can say, very politely, like, that I really, like, take I statements out of it. I go back to, this piece is from, this time, and this is the context of this time. And then revert back to the aesthetics, because for the Met, the mission is solely about aesthetic value.
And our mission is to connect people with the natural world. That is the museum's mission.
To impart knowledge and inspire appreciation of humanity's relationship with wildlife and nature through art and education.
I mean, I don't know if people are, like, personally for me, I would step back out of any conversation.
Well, yeah, but it's like that wolf painting over the fireplace. I will always say that's the fastest way to start an argument in the state of Wyoming outside of Teton County.
Well, and I do think that your own personality comes into play to some extent. You can choose what you're comfortable with saying and what you're not comfortable with saying. And that bringing it back to the art is one way of, not just taking you out of the equation for their sake, but for your own sake too. That you can step back and be like, well, this is why we have this piece, this is why it's in our collection, this is how it connects to our mission.
Can you add something?
Yes,
to that?
please.
I think, this is something I've worked on a lot as an educator. We all carry who we are into our, like, whenever we're teaching, I carry who I am into every class that I teach, and I think it's just important to then have an awareness of what you're carrying and what are my own biases, what are my own perspectives that I have, that I know will influence what I do, and just have that awareness so that when somebody asks something or somebody says something, you're able to say, like, okay, let me, like, check my own biases and perspectives here and see if I'm interpreting this or I'm going at this in a way that's filtered through my bias. I think that really is what's, like, core. Not necessarily, like, being neutral, because I think it's
Hard to do.
hard to be neutral, but just
It is.
being aware of what your biases are, what your perspectives are.
It's a, yeah, and being able to say, like you say, some people feel strongly this way, some people feel strongly this way. You're educating.
Yeah, as opposed to saying, well, I think this, I know that people think
It's
that's.
not about you.
Some people think there's, some people think that's the core of
That
it.
seems like a good way.
And most of these people are from out of state and don't realize the tensions that go on here. So that's one of the things that I see since I lived here. You know, that this is a very different environment and there is tension between ranchers or, you know, between people that want, you know, to, like, kill 400 bison in the park every year. I said, and it's our national just that it exists and you pay attention to it because we're here, because before I was here, I never even knew this existed. So that's kind of the way I talk about it.
Great.
Um,
Okay, thanks.
I'll have a way probably.
There was one more question that the survey asked, which was how museums should reflect a changing America. Number one answer, broadening audiences is okay, but not at the expense of core content. The number two answer, broadening audiences, core content equally important. And the number three was stay with the same core content, which was here. And then the other two options, which had that 15% and less, were audiences should reflect America and audiences should reflect community. So again, maroon is all museums, blue is our museum, and green is art museums. It's kind of interesting, just things to talk about. Do you have a comment, Carrie?
Oh yeah, I just want to say something that's really interesting looking at this that I haven't noticed before. So AAM, the American Alliance of Museums, which they were, they helped support this survey, right?
Yes, they did. And there's a link here, and I'll be sharing this PowerPoint with everybody. You can click on this link and you can see the full, assuming that I've shared it with you. I'll be able to share with you that you can see all the questions and all the results.
I love that. Yeah, I just looking at this, I was like, oh, it's so interesting. So AAM, who, yeah, they're like the accrediting organization, you know, that like we and many other museums need to make sure we're following their protocols and standards in order to remain an accredited museum. One of their newer standards is this idea of your museum should be striving to reflect the community that you're based in. And it's just really interesting to see that in this survey of visitors, it's like, oh, that doesn't seem as important, but then the accrediting organization that, I mean, it is, you know, we must work toward those goals in order to remain a museum. It's like, no, this is actually a mandate to maintain your accreditation. So I just noticed that. It's just a really
I
interesting,
noticed that when
you
I
know,
was
the
putting this together
perception,
too.
yeah, versus what, you know, our sort of mission as like an accredited museum. It's just really, that's an interesting thing to think about.
And then to me, when I look at these answers, like broadening audience is okay, but not expensive core content, it's people who are trying to be really conscious of what their organization's mission is and that they not stray from their mission, which we do care about. All museums care about that.
Right, because again, this is about figuring out the, what was I gonna say? The first slide here was like engaging you with content, like that's why they're asking these questions. And so they're asking, what kinds of content do you want to see in the museum? Do you want it to reflect America as a whole right now? Do you want it to affect the community of the museum in which you're attending? Or would you rather that audiences be a little bit broader, but that you go to a wildlife art museum to see wildlife art and that you would expect to see that kind of content there? I think is really what this slide is about. You don't want to come to a wildlife art museum and see some exhibit about some American problem that doesn't relate to us. Again, it's mission-based, right? Okay, so there are a lot of artists of sort of questionable character, right? Present and past, that we could look at as examples. But today I chose to reference some articles. I have one about Titian that was sent to me by Carrie right after Kelsey's presentation. Like, wow, this is super interesting based on what we just talked about. Also, Chuck Close is an interesting case. And John James Audubon. So I want to kind of focus on John James Audubon today because he relates so much to our collection.
And do we have somewhere in some packet the Chuck Close or the Titian stuff?
Yeah, I have copies of the Chuck Close here if you all are interested to see them. I'm just going to pull out a couple points from a couple articles I saw because I don't want to bore you all to death. You all familiar with Chuck Close and his art? Okay. Oh, this is just a little note saying, I was talking to Julia, she has this term called predatory listening, so I love that, now that I'm putting that in here. No predatory listening today, and that really I'm just telling you, we're having this discussion as food for thought, as things to think about, things to consider. Nimwa, me, none of us are forcing any one viewpoint or another on anybody. Again, it is we're just trying to stick to our mission. So there's our mission for you again. So the Titian article that was sent to me was, can we ever look at Titian's paintings the same way again? So the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, has anybody been there?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Boston, right? It's a place I'd like to see that museum, it's very cool, yeah. Anyway, the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum had a recent exhibition, I think even in 2021, called Titian, Women, Myth, and Power, which raised questions about how, in art from the distant past, viewed through the lens of the political present, aesthetics and ethics can clash. So, for example, in Titian's painting that was on display, The Rape of Europa, a Phoenician princess is abducted and forcibly impregnated by a god in disguise. Its theme can't help but put us on red alerts today, when accusations and reports of sexual assault on women appear almost daily in the news. Purely in terms of formal innovation and historical influence, great is what this art is. And that's what the Gardner had to say about it. So what did they do to address this controversy of these paintings and this artist? They said that increasingly a lot of older art, if it's going to be alive for new audiences, will need to be presented from these dual perspectives as formerly superlative creations, but also as containers of difficult, often negative histories. And so the Gardner understood that point, and they created specific printed texts with the art, audio interviews that placed 16th century works in the show in the context of current cultural thinking. And they made two contemporary works, they had two contemporary works commissioned specifically for this exhibit. One was hung outside, and it was a giant banner. It was called Body Language. It was a large vertical banner with magnified detail from Titian's painting Diana and Actaeon, of a muscular tanned male leg stretch across a pale, bare female one as if pinning it down. And they also created a 9-minute film titled The Rape of Europa, which was by two artists in their Artist in Residence program, in which Europa, post-abduction and newly pregnant, is a limerick-spouting 21st century feminist intent on asserting a creative history for women past and present. So they kind of took it on head on. They were like, okay, this is controversial, and we're just going to be like, here's another way of looking at it, right? That's a pretty bold move on their part, really. So I thought that was fascinating. Any comments on any of that?
I have a question. This painting depicts some Greek mythology.
Yes.
That's what it is. It's
Yes.
Greek mythology.
Yes.
It was not an actual rape of any woman.
Right.
It was Greek mythology, which I think is the most important thing to remember when you're talking about that painting. I just
Good
wanted
point.
to make sure.
Good point. Yeah. Yeah. But I guess some people would be offended by that, you know, for whatever reason someone would, that bothers people.
Granted, but
Yeah.
again,
But
if you
you're right.
move it back to the painting depicts Greek
What
mythology,
is this painting?
not an
What is it
actual
showing?
rape.
Yes.
And if you think about the history of Greek mythology being important or looked up to historically or culturally, that is the message again and again, that it was all right for the gods to do this, you know?
There's an anthropologist whose name escapes me, but he wrote an article about the fact that some of these mythological god and woman being raped was actually oftentimes a high-level woman's response to getting pregnant outside of marriage. I was raped by a man. So it's kind of interesting that there's, you just like, there's all kinds of explanations.
That's
How about
fascinating.
our painting in?
Yeah, the Joseph Stella.
Absolutely.
Right.
With the swan, with the Joseph Stella in the modernism gallery with the
Oh, the
swan.
modernism.
Leda and the swan. Leda and the swan.
I just think you just don't know unless you're in the studio at that moment sometimes. I just chose a very, very hot color for some Indian paintbrush because I was in a really pissy mood. I just don't know.
Yeah, we can, one of the things we can talk about, or one of the points that I brought up in this presentation is that we can't go back. We weren't there. We have hints in history that, that tell us how people felt and what they were thinking, but we can't know because we weren't there. And that's one thing to think about, right? One sort of theme that weaves throughout this conversation that I find really interesting.
But what I love about this is they're thinking ahead, and they're thinking, how will different members of our audience potentially respond to this piece? And they're, like you said, they're addressing it before it becomes a problem.
Right.
I also like that they're talking about art as a historical container, because I think regardless of that we can't go back in history and know exactly what was going on, that art has influence beyond that moment, and I think that's important to acknowledge too. That we're thinking about the rape of Europa, like that narrative is perpetuating something, and regardless of what was going on in that moment to viewers through history. So that's another important piece. It doesn't stand alone in time because so many people are seeing it and interpreting it.
It's a great point. Yeah.
I have another point though. How many people walking through would view that painting at what it is, a depiction of mythology, and that would be the end of it? Now, the museum, by putting this huge banner outside, has brought more attention to the idea than if they had not. So rather than, for me, I don't think they hit it head on. I think they made it into a big deal that it might not happen.
Might sell more tickets.
That's an interesting question.
It is. It is an interesting question.
But does it just keep the conversation going coarser and coarser and coarser?
I mean, I think the
We
point
keep
here,
doing that.
the point here that's important for me is that first sentence that, especially with older art, if you want to keep displaying this and people, if it's still worth seeing, right? The question is, how do we keep people interested in it? What is the museum for?
Right.
Right. Well, we'll get to that too. We'll talk about
I
that.
know, when I read that, I was like, if it was me, I probably would have had the artist in residence who did the rap, limerick or whatever, but I probably wouldn't have done the banner.
I think I'm kind of with you there. The banner is pretty in your face.
Yeah, the banner
Yeah.
just feels like before you even get in.
But
to the
what's
museum.
interesting about that banner is it was just straight out of a tissue painting. It was like any other museum that
A
would put
detail.
It was a detail that a lot of museums would put a decal from a painting to advertise an exhibit that's there. We have these beautiful tissue paintings. Look at this detail from this tissue painting, and it's completely inappropriate to some people. But let's put it on our building. It's crazy.
Because at the end of the day, their goal is to get people through the door.
It is. Again, it's mission-based. What are they trying to do? Are they really trying to educate people? And is bringing up both sides of this controversy going to somehow support their mission in
And
that
it
way
sounds like with
versus
the
not
banner,
having it?
they were trying to jar people,
It
get their
does sound
attention,
that way.
and maybe get them in the door.
It does sound
And
that
get a big article in the paper.
Mhm.
A lot of
It's entirely
controversy.
possible.
I
It's
think
like
you also
back to the, like, what is that saying? Any publicity is good publicity.
Bad publicity is good publicity.
Sorry, you were about to say.
Oh, I did the museum, but
I think you
this
know
is
who the
a-
artists are, because that's the person who says, oh my God, look at those clouds.
Right, they won't notice the lake, they're gonna be looking at some other detail.
Yeah, and honestly, I think, I think it's always easier to be quiet or
Yes.
silent
Mhm.
about these things. It's always easier to do that. They didn't have to do anything at all. And, I think it's interesting that they were trying to kind of like have a conversation with new audiences in this way. And, for a subject, though it is depicting Greek mythology, there's a lot of like horrific things in Greek mythology. And it's a lot about tells us a lot about existing power structures at the time. And I think it's just interesting to be able to kind of question that and poke fun at it, and also acknowledge for people who, maybe this is a emotional subject matter for them, that the museum is acknowledging, like, hey, look, like, we know that this is, we're not celebrating this
Right.
by putting it on display. And I don't know, I think it's kind of interesting. It's an interesting take for me.
So that's a good segue over to Chuck Close, who was accused of sexual harassment. speaking of taking the easy road out, Seattle University removed its close self-portrait that they had from display. They just took it down. Saying, "We were concerned about potential student, faculty, or staff reaction to seeing the self-portrait and decided that the prudent and proactive course of action would be to replace the self-portrait with another work." It wasn't clear in the article if they replaced it, I'm assuming with some other artist, not with another, unless it was specifically the self-portrait that they found controversial, which is possible. They may have put up a different Chuck Close that was not a self-portrait.
I doubt it.
But I doubt it too. I think they took down Chuck Close and said, "We're not going there. See you later. Come look at this other piece of art." Another thing that you can do, like you said, maybe that's easier. Is it better or not? Does it suit their mission or not? That's questionable. Another example, an exhibit of Close's work at the National Gallery in Washington was completely canceled because of the sexual harassment accusations against him. Of course, he denied them. But the curators insisted the show can't go on. That said, they did keep his works in the permanent collection. What's interesting to me at this point is now Chuck Close has passed away. He died in August this year. So how does that change things? You know, will these museums go, well, he's not here to defend himself or be accused of anything, so we can hang his work now and just talk about the art without talking about the artist in a way that's convenient.
They didn't take down every Picasso.
Right. Picasso's a great example.
You know, so I had a time in my life where I knew him a little bit, and I mean, to think that it's an accusation.
Mm-hmm.
He's a crabby guy. He was in a wheelchair all the time. He was like, frankly, crabby to everybody. I mean, so, I don't know, it just seems a tough call.
Yeah.
I have a question. Did the accusation come up like at that time, right before the,
I think
The
some more
National
serious ones did. I think he was accused as early as the 70s, but I think Me Too, kind of, the whole Me Too movement, things were coming to light that were bigger.
And
that
that
people were speaking
coincided
about more.
with when they made this decision.
It did. I think that when it really started snowballing was when these exhibits were going up.
But there's still allegations.
Right.
It was not proved. And he was a quadriplegic, and one of the accusations was that he put hands on people and was like,
Right.
Well,
Mm-hmm.
I think the wording is interesting where it says the show can't go on. And then whoever wrote this said they did keep his work in the collection.
Yeah.
It had no value, right? I mean, he's alive and nobody really liked him at that point, so how are they gonna sell it? So what else are they gonna do with it? You know? Burn it? You know? I mean, sometimes I think words get taken and it
Mm-hmm.
tries to fan a fire that doesn't exist. You know, now that he's dead, maybe they can sell it and make money, you know?
Maybe.
did any of his art, I'm not familiar with him that much, did any of his art depict things that would be controversial?
you would know his work if you
Yeah,
saw it.
I'll
I don't think so.
there's a picture here of him. Oh, this is a New York Times article, so it's gonna kick me out. Dang it. I think this one might be too.
I think he was the original pixel.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
did really big. I mean, I can Google him.
Okay.
He has,
Rachel, your car warranty is expired.
Right.
Yeah.
So here's like his giant portraits that he did, and these were huge. I mean, really big canvases, but super interesting sort of pixelations, and you know, this is really just squares of abstract shapes that when you back up, they make a portrait. This is a self-portrait. So that's what he's most known for, is these sort of pixelated portraits. He did other things too, but he did a lot of like foods.
So he wasn't showing, you know,
Sexual
images showing sexual rape.
really
rape
close
of
eyeballs.
women or something.
Up Close with Chuck Close. I think there's a book called that. I think my mom had a copy. Yeah, that's kind of the classic Chuck Close book. I remember growing up with that. But yeah, cool. No, I don't have $1 a week to give you. I'm sorry.
It only lasts this long.
Okay, so where was I? Okay, so more sort of quotes from this article. What Mr. Close makes is indeed of artistic merit. It is in its innovative aesthetic value and, more important, in its openness to interpretation. To reduce his creations to pure personal biography is to strip them of their status as art. I think that question of what is art is fascinating to me, so this kind of ties in that whole theme. What makes something great? What makes it art? Even if certain artists are unpleasant, immoral, or even criminal, to look at their work is still to learn something. It is to still grapple with grander questions that go beyond the artist himself. That place, of course, in which these questions might be dealt with, in which the viewer gets to contend with the many facets of the art and the artist, is in these very institutions. So this article is saying that the museum is a perfect place to have these conversations. Where else are you going to be able to safely talk to people about this artist, this art, and the history of it? It said, for the most part, curators and museum directors say that making artistic decisions based on personal behavior is a dangerous road to go down. How much are we going to do a litmus test on every artist in terms of how they behave? Pablo Picasso is one of the worst offenders of the 20th century in terms of his history with women. Are we going to take his work out of the galleries? At some point you have to ask yourself, is the art going to stand alone as something that needs to be seen? If we only see abuse when looking at a work of art, then we have created a reductive situation in which art is stripped of its intrinsic worth, and which in turn provokes the fundamental question of what the museum's role in the world should be. Whatever museums ultimately decide to do about Mr. Close, some say they can no longer afford to simply present art without addressing the issues that surround the artist, that institutions must play a more active role in educating the public about the human beings behind the work. So I think that gets to kind of the core of our conundrum, right? That's kind of nails it into, two sentences there, for me, anyway. Any comments on any of that about Chuck Close?
Oh, who was the author of this piece?
Oh, so let's see. This one. I swear I used a whole ream of paper for this. Oh, here it is. So, there were two articles here, both from the New York Times. One was from 2018. Both of them were 2018. January 28th, 2018 and January 30th, 2018. Cody Dillastrati and Robin Pogrebin and Jennifer Schussler.
Journalists at the New York Times.
Yeah, both in the New York Times, both at the same time. So this must have been kind of at the peak of what was going on with him. I highlighted most of the stuff that I used in this PowerPoint. Okay, so I think that's Chuck Close. So as I said, you'll find a printed article. There's one on each of the round tables. They're all different. They're all about Audubon. Okay, do we have someone who wants to go first?
Lori.
Lori does. Lori's gonna go first. Okay, we're gonna start with this table over here. They're gonna tell us about two from their own.
So,
5 minutes.
but you don't have to tell me what it is, because I am curious.
See if that comes up in the conversation. Okay, Lori, take it away. Which article did you have? You have, what do we do about John James Audubon? And you'll all get these links, by the way.
It was written by a black murder, is kind of really. Part of it, we really felt education was huge overall, and that when people don't understand or don't take the time to understand, things can get blown out of proportion. When we talk about, we ended up talking about how can a non-native person paint native subjects. How
We went on outside.
Yeah.
That's okay.
We went on to Grace Carpenter Hudson's.
That's good. You applied it to our collection. That's helpful.
And so, if that's the case, if you're not native, you can't depict correctly. But if it wasn't for the folks like Bodmer and Catlin and climber, we wouldn't have historical knowledge.
That's right.
So that whatever you want to say about that individual, at the end of the day, it's what did they do and what impact did it have and where can it take you in the future? As opposed to, you're bad, 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 I'm really tired of that in society. I want to know how things can be better and what little small part I can do.
So should we use, you use the word bad, should we use good and bad is a question?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Because it's
Perhaps
judging, and I
We
feel
should
like
perhaps, we should perhaps try to avoid that kind of language, right?
correct.
Yep. Okay. Good to see you. Great, thank you, Hillary. Okay, who's next?
I think so.
Yeah, they're all on Audubon.
This was a different.
But you may have taken a tangent, and that's okay if you want to share a tangent.
In this person.